Jean-Paul, it is an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. I know it's a very busy week for you. You're going to be flying off, I think, tomorrow morning or late this evening to Athens for your upcoming annual meeting. I know that I'm sure all of the audience and ICMA would love to hear some thoughts from you about the key topics being discussed at the meeting. And if you look at the work that IOSCO does, I know there's a very heavy agenda around sustainable finance, but I wondered if we could maybe look at two topics that I know are of big interest to a couple of people.
Surprise.
Yes.
Leverage.
Leverage, non-bank financial institution leverage, and then possibly, if we have time, AI and tokenization. So could you give us some thoughts on NBFI leverage and what's coming up in phase 2 of the next paper?
Okay, thanks for your kind words, and thanks for the publicity made for the role of financial supervisor. We're indeed working 7 days a week because we will start Sunday. Thanks for stressing that. And it will be my pleasure to welcome my colleagues. It's also my pleasure to welcome you in Brussels. It doesn't happen frequently that I'm giving speeches, I would say, in Brussels, so it's a real pleasure for me to welcome you in the capital of Europe. And especially with such a distinguished audience, more than 800 people, I've been told. Congratulations, a real success. I would say about the agenda of IOSCO, when I had the pleasure and the honor to be elected by all the board members, a little bit less 2 years ago, my first comment was quite strange for a financial supervisor, saying that to the private sector representative, it was about speed. Not necessarily what you expect from the community of supervisors. But speed for me was important for the agenda for 3 reasons, I would say, linked with the issue and the agenda. Which means that when you speak about sustainable finance, about crypto, digital age and NBFI, there are many expectations. Many expectations from John and Mary in the street for sustainable finance. There is a need for having, I would say, a global toolkit at international level because not only institutional investors but also retail investors are not interested at all in using, I would say, a kind of alphabet soup with many label standards. And we were able, I would say, to speed up the endorsement of the well-known ISSB standards. It was the case last year in Bangkok during our former annual meeting, I would say. Call for action to the jurisdiction, 130 jurisdictions. That's also the added value of IOSCO. We are global standard setters, 130 jurisdictions. Our members are involved in the supervision of, in various capacity, of 95% of all the financial market supervision. So it means whenever you have to deal with global risk, challenges, opportunity, IOSCO must be there somewhere. Not only IOSCO, but also FSB, World Bank, IMF, OECD. And that's what we did, I would say. 1 year after, I will have the pleasure next week, indeed, to welcome the first mover. Emmanuel Faber will be there, I would say. First move, of course, the EU, I would say, with interoperability. 50,000 companies applying now the SRS standards, which are in line, fully compatible with ISSB standards. And the objective is to welcome, I would say, the first mover. So speed was there. So now it's time for implementation. Speed was also there. We'll come back for a toolkit about crypto, 18 recommendations for the sake of the quality of supervision of cross-border CASP, crypto assets. Speed also about NBFI. That's maybe more surprising because I would say some people would have expected that I would be the first to say in Basel during the FSB meeting chaired by my colleague and friend Klaas Knot, okay, no, the urgency, it's not about NBFI. It's about you working in the bank, BFI, because there was some events in California, not far from the EU. So many people were expecting that the chair of ASCO would say, well, that's, I would say, first thing first, that's a job for Pablo Cos, not for Jean-Paul Servais. In fact, what I did, I would say, with the support of all IOSCO, no, we don't have, I would say, to downgrade the priorities. There are issues which are not new. LTCM 27 years ago, Archegos, LDI, of course, and of course the turmoil at the outbreak of the COVID crisis. So there is an agenda. Which is new is that we are now involved in a very important, deep, efficient partnership with the FSB. We start, I would say, with a common work stream about an update of our papers relating to the liquidity management tools of open-ended funds. We start together at two levels, FSB guidelines and our toolkit, and we finish together. I had the pleasure to organize with Klaas and John Schindler, the Secretary General of FSB, the first common press conference at the end of last year, in order to explain that first, we are on the same line, not expected. We have solution, okay, and we are now switching implementation, and also with, I think, a positive feedback from the industry. So it must be that it's a kind of Belgium compromise, because let us be clear, we had many discussions with you. So it means at the end of the day, IOSCO plus FSB, it works. And I proposed to Klaas Knot more recently to copy and paste, if I may call it that, the same approach, because it's not only about technical issues, it's about architecture. If you have, I would say, the IOSCO ecosystem on board, it means that's the place to be to discuss many aspects about asset management, but about NBFI. And leverage, of course, is a new work stream. So it means that we are now working with a new work stream co-chaired by two ladies, excellent person, Sarah Pritchard, UK FCA, that's representative of IOSCO, and of course a representative, a well-known representative of the ECB and the SS Cornelia, and it works. So they start together the journey, which is not an easy one, and just a message, I would say, for the industry from this point of view. If we want to have, I would say, a fruitful journey about leverage, I would say, it means to have a step-by-step approach, I would say. First thing first is to see what we have. And personally, I think that we are richer than we think. We already have a lot of data which are available, I would say, at national level, and I discussed that with Cornelia recently, but also at regional level, especially when we speak about leverage. It doesn't mean that it would be easy. Let us be clear, no chance for having a one-size-fits-all approach. And BFI, it means insurance, pension funds, family office, hedge fund, classical aspect of asset management, even factoring. So for this, we need data. And I would say the first exercise, which is now completed, was for the first time an impressive assessment, a survey of what we already have. The question is to see how to work. We have different kind of frequency, deadline, scope, and so on. The second one, and it's, I think, now 3:30, so you had a lunch at 1 o'clock. That just done is fine. So this is a message for the members of ICMA. I will read it, but I think that I have to say that from a positive point of view. I think that we have to admit that entities that provide leverage generally do fall within the scope of regulation and supervision, prime brokers. We should ensure at all times that risk management practices of these entities are appropriate. So it means not only a focus about, I would say, entity, but also about activity. That's something that I repeat, I think, every meeting at FSB level. And hopefully, at the end of the day, the pleasure to see an excellent paper published by the Basel Committee. I would say recently that everybody knows, I presume, Peter, you know it, I presume, already read. I would say it's a new consultation of the Basel Committee on guidelines for counterparty credit risk with, I would say, yes, a life cycle approach. That's very important. If we are not able to accept that we need to have a comprehensive approach, supply and demand, it won't be successful. And I think that now more and more people are, I would say, convinced by the approach. We are now switching, I would say, to phase 2. The objective is to have a consultation paper to be published by the FSB at the end of the year. But I think, ladies and gentlemen, representative of, I would say, the banking industry, if we want to be successful, what will be instrumental? Data sharing. Not easy. It's about professional secrecy, most of the time. But we need to accept that first thing first. First data, fact-finding, and then policy, and see what we need. And that's, I would say, my message for, I would say, NBFI leverage. But again, we are now starting with the right architecture. I would say on equal footing approach, FSB, IOSCO, which was not the case before. And I think, but it means also that now we are working together, which is absolutely instrumental for that.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. So, you know, I think a couple of points there. One is the partnership between FSB and IOSCO, which is clearly very important for the future. And the second point is around data. We've heard a lot about data already today. Yeah. Great that you reinforced that message. So thank you for that.
And again, if I may, if we do not accept the debate about data, you know what it means. It means coming directly with political measure, which is maybe, I think, not the best approach when we speak about NBFI.
Well, I think you've made that point very clear. I know we only have a minute and a half left, but maybe, I know time flies when you're having fun, hey?
That's right.
Maybe you can just give us a couple of minutes on your thoughts around financial asset tokenization.
Okay, so two things. Speed was also important for all the digital agenda. I think that it was a surprise for many people to see that we were able to deliver on time. I had the pleasure to organize a press conference in the premises of the UKFCA. I was surprised to see so many people on board from the media, because I think one of the reasons was they were surprised that we were able to deliver so quickly a toolkit, 18 recommendations, I would say, about what we need in order to ensure an appropriate implementation of supervision for cross-border toolkit. We start on time, before the crypto winter, before some accident in the various jurisdictions, but we were also able to take on board some lessons to be learned. Now we are switching to the implementation, not alone. We have also, that's also the new world of IOSCO, I would say. I had a lot of discussion with the leadership of IMF. So one of the objectives already publicly set by many representatives of IMF is to try to see to which extent IMF could, I would say, endorse our toolkit in order to take that on board for Article 4 or even FSAP. FSAP, why not? Article 4, you know, you are not voluntary, you are required to do, so we'll see a step-by-step approach. Again, I would say the objective is to avoid any overlapping, and the same for tokenization. For this, we have an excellent, I would say, task force chaired by Tuan Li. And the objective, again, is to release a consultation paper next year. One comment, if I may, about artificial intelligence. Yesterday, I had the pleasure to be invited by the FSB, OECD, and OECD for artificial intelligence, I would say. Again, we are working together, I would say, with other standards. The objective is not to restart from scratch. It's like, I would say, for the digital engineer. How can we see to which extent we can copy and paste principles which are already well known about governance, about outsourcing, about safeguards, internal knowledge, not necessarily things which are and that many of you are required to do for 30 years. The problem is like for the digital agenda is how to reach and to convince, I would say, all the supplier, I would say for the micro and the macro possible risk, and to have these people on board. So it's about the outreach, and that's the reason I would say why the partnership with other SSB is so important. That's it.
Thank you, Jean-Paul. Clearly some very exciting times ahead across many aspects, including tokenization and AI. I wish you a very, very successful annual general meeting, and thank you again for making the time to come today. Are you going to leave that for us? Or,
yeah.
okay, all right. There we go. All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Have a good afternoon.